Everybody, my name is Robert Syke, and welcome to another Ag Advisor Pro webinar. We're really excited to bring these to you. Today, we have a very important webinar on Genesis Fertilizer and the updates and what it means for Western Canadian farmers. Joining us today, we have Jason Mann, who's the CEO of Genesis, and we also have Terry Drabiuk, who's the vice president. Terry's been on the road talking to farmers. This is a chance for us to get caught up on what's going on with Genesis Fertilizer. A lot in the news. The big elephant in the room is tariffs. Are they on? Aren't they on? Looks like Canada's dodged a bit of a bullet right now, maybe a bit of a reprieve, but it does bring to mind the importance of sovereignty and ensuring that we as Canadian agriculture have our own fertilizer supplies and that we have a say in what our supplies look like going into the future. So without further ado, there's been no shortage of information in the media on Genesis Fertilizer, but we're going to start off with a really important announcement. Jason, let's start off with the announcement by the Arctic Gateway Group. And you signed a deal with with Genesis Fertilizer and Arctic Gateway Group, and that's dealing with the Port of Churchill. What's that all about, and why is it so important, Jason?
Right. Yeah, thanks, Rob. Yeah, so we signed a letter of intent with Arctic Gateway Group to collaborate to solve bringing fertilizers and in particular phosphate into the Port of Churchill for Western Canadian farmers. And the genesis behind that is, Western Canada, or Canada, in fact, doesn't produce any phosphate. Everything's an imported ton. And, the Genesis project is about building a nitrogen plant because we're also short nitrogen in North America by 6 million tons of urea per year. So we have a lot of security of supply issues. And if we're going to produce 1 million tons of nitrogen product, we need phosphate to go with that. We're not just there to produce the nitrogen. Our business model is to have distribution hubs throughout Western Canada where we'll be offering and distributing the nitrogen fertilizer. But with that, you have the accompanying phosphates and sulfurs and potash and other types of fertilizer products. So we need the phosphate product to blend or go along with our nitrogen product, which means about 300,000 tons a year to accompany that approximately 1 million tons of nitrogen. So where does phosphate come from? Well, today, all the phosphate that ends up in Canada is either coming from the USA, or some is coming or was coming from Russia up until the Ukraine war that started in 2022. We have product that comes from North Africa, or it could be from Arab Gulf, or even some places in South America. But the point is, everything in Western Canada or in all of Canada is imported tons. So let's find the optimized transportation and logistics route for that, but also try and create some alternate supply channels that maybe don't touch on the U.S. today, given some of the uncertainties around tariffs and where that's all going. I just think it's a good idea for farmers to be in control of their fertilizer supply chain from top to bottom.
So this makes sense. I mean, Canada sovereign in sulfur, we're sovereign in potash, of course. Your plant, the Genesis plant, will make us more or less reliant on external sources of nitrogen, and then phosphorus coming into Port of Churchill. Tell me a little bit about the Port of Churchill, and a lot of us hear a lot about it, or I think a lot of us have impressions about the Port of Churchill. I've never been myself, but strategically it's quite important. And then I'll ask Terry a question about how this came to be. But can you tell us a little bit about strategically why you think this is important, Jason?
Yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, Churchill is the tidewater that's closest to most of Western Canadian farmers. It's the closest port. People think that it's way up north and it's full of ice all the time, and it's not a year-round port, but then neither is Thunder Bay, right? So it's not open year-round, but it's a deep seawater port. So you can bring large vessels, Panamax vessels, into Churchill, like a 30,000 ton vessel or more, which gives you economies of scale on your ocean freight. So that's one advantage, is you can bring in ocean, salty vessels versus when you're doing the Great Lakes, you're bringing a salty into Trois-Rivières, Montreal, and then you're transloading it on a laker and going up the canals and through the Great Lakes. So I think there's a cheaper or lower cost ocean freight to get to Churchill, and you're the closest tidewater port to Western Canadian farmers. So I think there's that. I think it's great to support Churchill because it is strategic infrastructure. It's collaborating with northern communities that are the owners of it. And there's a lot of support. There's a lot of tailwinds right now for Churchill. We've seen bipartisan support for the port. We've seen it both from both the front runner candidates are both putting Churchill in their platform. Arctic Gateway Group has received some considerable funding over the last number of years to improve the rail and to improve the port. There's just a couple of recent announcements. They received a $90 million funding. That was I think it was a combination of Fed and provincial Manitoba province funding for port improvements. And then I just about 10 days ago, they had another announcement for another $175 million to support their ongoing operations over the next 5 years. So Churchill's there. Churchill's going to happen, and that's been the problem with Churchill is that it's been run down because of who owned it and different things. But now that it's in good hands and there's lots of government support, it's a very viable port.
Good. Well, Terry, you had your hand in helping to orchestrate some of this, and some folks out of Tisdale, Saskatchewan. I want to create a shout out to them. Can you talk to me about the role that they play?
Yeah, sure. So like Jason had mentioned, we're looking at a distribution network throughout Western Canada in a number of different forms. But
so these are potentially called super centers, right?
That's right. We call them super centers because they're really the need for speed. And the one that we built at Belle Plaine is extremely fast. It'll load a blended Super B in 7.5 minutes. And I could go through the whole, basically benefits of those super centers, but it is need for speed. So I was tasked to go out and look for locations where we would put these super centers. And I come across an organization in Tisdale called Invest Tisdale. And Invest Tisdale is kind of unique because the town of Tisdale has partnered with the RM, and they're more than just economic development. They're kind of red tape reduction. And out of all the locations that I've looked at, they've really made it simple to come to Tisdale. And then even over and above that, they're constantly trying to help us out in terms of connections like the one that we made with Arctic Gateway. So they're the ones who introduced us to Arctic Gateway. And then from there on, so great group.
Jason, there's a strong connection here with a group called the One North Group as well. Can you talk a little bit about them and how important they are in this whole announcement that you guys have done?
Well, the Arctic Gateway Group is 29 Indigenous communities and 12, I would say, northern communities that are all served along the Hudson Bay Railway. So that Hudson Bay Railway is critical infrastructure for all those communities. So, they make up part of this, and they're the ones that have been the catalyst behind all this stuff that's been going on at Churchill and on the Hudson Bay Railway.
As we shift the conversation towards progress with the Genesis project itself, I wanted to link back to one more thought in this. And, whether carbon is on the mind or not on the mind of politicians or the citizenry, it is a factor in calculating out sustainability indexes and stuff. And a thing that I learned about is the Port of Churchill provides us with a lower carbon footprint for transportation. Can you just touch on that, Jason?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, it just comes down to logistics efficiencies. If we can load a vessel of fertilizer, say from Morocco, and it's a pretty short route from Morocco to Churchill, and if you can bring a bigger vessel, it's just your amount of energy used to move those tons around is less, so therefore a lower carbon footprint. And then on top of that, the fact that you are the closest port to Tidewater, you've just got less inland transportation as well. So you are lowering your carbon footprint, which is aligned with what we're doing in Genesis Fertilizers by, doing the carbon capture on the ammonia production as well, or on the whole plant's production. Actually, we're doing carbon capture on the whole plant. So we're very keen on lowering the carbon footprint, because that's also, I think, a benefit for farmers when they're using a low carbon fertilizer. It should have some trickle down effects on the value of their commodities at the end of the day, as we know food companies are interested in paying a premium for low carbon grains.
Right. From an agronomic standpoint, if we can track these inputs into the farm production, then that would result in something called insets, which is different than offsets. And that potentially is revenue generating for farmers. At the very least, it puts them in good stead with the people that are buying the produce off the farm. So that's kind of cool. So people have asked me, Rob, why, we've been doing quite a bit of work with Genesis. I've spoken at several of your events. Genesis Fertilizer is a partner on AgVisor Pro. AgVisor Pro is a mobile-centric app that matches questions to experts and companies like Genesis. And Genesis has a community called the Genesis Community on AgVisor Pro. And I invite the listeners and people who are watching this video to download AgVisor Pro, join the Genesis community, join the communication there, ask your questions, all of that sort of thing. So one of the reasons that I, feel so passionately about the opportunity for farmers to participate in the Genesis project is, if it all comes off as planned, as you guys are working on, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Terry, but farmers would own, 75% of the equity of the Genesis Fertilizer nitrogen facility outside of Regina. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
All right, so talk to me a little bit about the philosophy, Terry, of that.
Well, it's really based around bankability and our closed loop system. And what I mean by that is that the people who actually own the plant are the people who take the product from the plant. So obviously it's an offtake agreement, and they're entitled to those tons perpetuity for as long as they want them. And it demonstrates to the banks that the product's sold even before it's made.
Okay, so let's talk about the things that are done. Now I'm going to shift over to Jason in just a second. But Terry, the check boxes, the land is there, the feedstock for natural gas is there. Can you just go through that little checklist of what? I mean, it's not a little checklist, a very important checklist about what is been done, and all of the things that people need to understand, that this isn't pie in the sky. This stuff there's check boxes that have been checkboxed here.
Yeah, it's interesting to note, Rob. We had a meeting in Manitoba and Portage last week, I think it was, and Greg from PricewaterhouseCoopers was there and made a presentation. And in his presentation, he talked about, I don't think you realize, and he was talking to the crowd, how many boxes and puzzle pieces that we've put together, and it's big. It's been instrumental. So we've got the land, like you said, we've got a pretty solid board from industry and from finance. We've also got some room. The board is actually looking for some members to sit on that board. We've contracted PricewaterhouseCoopers to look after the debt and the equity. We've signed all the licensing and PDPs for the technology agreements. We're in the throes of what we call the feed, the front end engineering and design, and that feed is basically being done by a myriad of engineers. So whether it be the environmental aspect of Maclebrota, or the construction firm that in Canada that's planning on doing it, and they've signed a joint venture with our South Korean engineer in that. So the construction in Canada is PCL, and then Day Lim Engineering is out of South Korea. They've got people working on this. Our entire engineering team has moved to South Korea to work on the feed now, and plus Stammy Carbon and Tyson Krupp and Carbon Co. and Jason. I've probably missed somebody, but there's literally an army of engineers working on this feed.
Yeah, Jason, let's talk about those badges, those company logos that Terry just threw around. significant in terms of the type of people, and they're not just going to put their logo on your PowerPoint for the sake of promotion. These are serious players. Can you comment about how do you feel about where you're at and the people that are throwing their coming alongside of the Genesis project?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just can't underscore how big of a milestone it is that we are in the feed. Most projects don't make it to feed, and it's hard, for somebody that's not, deep into it as well. What is a feed and what is that anyways? Well, front end engineering and design, that's everything about the project. The best laid plans. On a project like this, it's a mega project. It's a petrochemical plant. Planning, engineering, doing everything up front right. So when it's time to put a shovel in the ground, there's no surprises. So the more you spend on the planning and the development up front, the more successful your project's going to be. So, we felt that was very important to pick the top tier players in the industry. And when we hired our own internal engineering team. We have a team of, what started with us 5 engineers that are actually in-house at Genesis. And, the combined experience between those engineers is, I guess it's, maybe 120 years of experience in running ammonia and urea facilities, all very seasoned engineers that have built plants and operated plants all around the world. So we're relying on a lot of lessons learned and actual operations of plants when we sat down to design our plant and select our technologies. So we spent a year just interviewing all the different technology providers to make sure we were picking best in class, which meant that we chose ThyssenKrupp Uhde as our ammonia front-end ammonia plant. And ThyssenKrupp has a really good reputation and has many plants around the world, probably more than anyone else. We chose Stamicarbon, and they're from Germany. And then we have Stamicarbon from the Netherlands, who has the urea synthesis technology. So first you make the ammonia, then you convert that into urea, and then the urea gets granulated. So the granulation technology is ThyssenKrupp Fertilizers, sister company to Uhde, who's the ammonia, and then Stamicarbon, who's the urea synthesis. These are all the top-notch companies, top-shelf companies in fertilizer production. And, we did all this work and all this assessment. And in the end, we came back with the same players that built the Saskburko plant back in 1993. They're the same players. So they've all there. And even some of the people in the companies, they were here in 1993 when the plant was being built. So it's kind of interesting for them. It's like, oh, deja vu. We're back in Saskatchewan designing and building a plant. But so important to have the right players. So and it's not just those technologies. It's the engineering, procurement, and construction companies, probably the most pivotal. That's your EPC, because they're the ones taking all the technologies, tying them all in together, and then doing the estimation and quoting on what the project is going to cost, going out and getting quotes on all the different equipment to make sure that we've got a tight budget on the project. But not just that, coming up with a work plan. How do we build this plant efficiently to save construction costs? And so Daelim out of South Korea has a very good reputation for this. They've built a lot of ammonia plants, not in Canada, but they've built a lot. So they're known for this. And they have a lineup of clients that want them to do projects for them. Daelim is like a Samsung or a Hyundai. They're one of these South Korean conglomerates. So very reputable, very well known for doing on time, on budget projects. And they have a lineup of clients. And we were very fortunate to convince them to do our project. And one of the reasons was, back to those other names like the Stamicarbons and the Uhdes of the world, they also helped us champion to get Daelim to do our project.
So you actually, Genesis is actually a staff over in South Korea right now.
Yeah, we've moved our engineering team over there. They're sitting side by side with Daelim in their offices working. They will be there, during the feed, which takes about there's about 12 more months of feed yet. They're there for the whole duration of the feed, the front-end engineering design. And then they're probably there for another year after that. Once the project even starts and we start putting a shovel in the ground here, there's still a whole lot more of detailed engineering that has to go on. And our engineering team will sit in Korea probably for about over 2 years. So it's quite a commitment on it from our engineering team to go sit in Korea for that duration of time. I cannot stress about how much emphasis on the engineering and doing that properly to get the good results.
I hear a lot, Jason, about the timeline it's taken to get to this point in time. But when you think about the magnitude of the project, it's a big project. There are a lot of things to move, a lot of chess pieces on the board. And like you said, you have two engineering firms basically that championed you guys so you guys could get the South Korean firm to work on the feed. So there's a lot of it takes time.
That's right. And we're not building a grain elevator or a seed plant. This is a lot more complex of a project, but there's been hundreds of them built around the world. It's not like it's something new and novel. They're built all over the world. You just need to do it right. And that's what we're doing. We're ensuring that we do it right, taking the time, taking all the right steps so that, you know, we're entrusted with a lot of money from farmers, and we want to make sure we take all the right steps to do it right.
Terry, Jason said something. I remember when Saskatchewan's plant was opened in 1993. I was just a young buck in the agriculture sector back then, but he does bring up a point that the fertilizer infrastructure, the manufacturing infrastructure in Canada is pretty old, maybe older than us even. Terry, can you comment on how old that infrastructure is?
Well, I think we were both young bucks at the time. Yeah, well, sure. I mean, you've got nitrogen producers in Western Canada. You've got Coke over in Brandon, and it's a refurbished Italian plant. I'm sure they've done upgrades, but it's an older plant. And then you've got Yara that's at Belle Plaine, which originated as Saskatchewan, and it's the newest plant in Western Canada, and it's 35 years old. Then you can move over to Alberta. You've got CF Industries in Medicine Hat. It's cruising up to 50 years old. You've got Nutrien in Carsland, and Red Deer in Alberta, or not Red Deer, sorry, Redwater in Alberta. So they're all old plants, and I know Jason will talk to this in length, but we're really concerned about supply. And you think about, Rob, if any one of those plants went down, and what would be the price of fertilizer if that happened? And so supply is critical. This is a big part of why Genesis is building a nitrogen plant for Canadians, for Canadian farmers.
I want to go back, Jason, because I didn't get a full answer on the site itself, and I'd like to build some color around the acreage and the feed lines that are right around the site. And again, this isn't fabrication; this is all there. Can you give us a quick checklist as to what is going on at the site? How many acres, location,
right. Yeah.
etc.
Yeah, so Genesis owns approximately a half section. It's about a mile north of the Saskatchewan site, and this is sort of an industrial corridor. That's what the province calls it at any rate. They have a desire for this to be an industrial corridor. Like I said, we're a mile north of the Saskatchewan plant. Across the road from us is the Mosaic potash mine. There's Alpine is there with their liquid fertilizers. We've got the co-op ethanol plant there. It is an industrial hub. What's unique about this area is the infrastructure. It's all the utilities and inputs you need for any kind of a petrochemical plant. You need feedstock. So the main thing there is natural gas. Well, we have this thing called Pipeline Road that runs through Western Canada down to the east, which has all the main pipelines in it. And the Pipeline Row actually sits on the south border of our land. So the good news is the pipelines are really close to us, and the bad news is the pipelines are really close to us because they're right on our site. So we have to work around it a bit, but we've got the gas supply right at our site, like within meters. We have both the CN and the CP railroads are adjacent to our property. We have the water from Buffalo Pound Lake is very near, and Sask Water is putting in more infrastructure to service this industrial corridor. We have the power grid is right there, and then we have the Trans-Canada Highway is 2 miles to the south. So we have all the infrastructure there. And what's interesting about that is you look at some other projects that are being worked on in different places in Canada or even the US. Often they have to bring rail in, or they have to bring the water line in, or the gas line in, and they have to bring it in like 10, 20, 30 miles, which is very expensive. We don't have
everything.
We don't have
Everything's
any of
there.
those costs because all those things which are outside battery limits, we call it, they're all at our doorstep. So that helps bring down the CapEx of our project because we have all those things there. And the other one that I didn't mention was also the carbon
I was
trunk.
going to remind you
We have
about
the
it.
carbon trunk. So,
Yep.
our good friends at Whitecap Resources there, they're working on a carbon sequestration project, and they have permitting, and I think they're already licensed to sequester CO2 because it has to get injected underground. They have a permitted area that's about, I don't know, maybe 10 miles from our project. So they have a place already approved where they can inject down the CO2 and store it permanently in what's called the saline aquifer, which is, some thousands of meters below the surface. So in essence, you take all the CO2 that's coming out of the stacks, you suck it all up, and you glean the CO2 out of it through a scrubber, take all the moisture out of it, etc., and then you pump it into a pipeline and you inject it. So that's what carbon capture is, and that's what we're doing on our project, and then collaborating with Whitecap to store it permanently underground.
Well, again, when you think about what I just said earlier in the conversation about farmers producing low carbon footprint canola, wheat, oats, barley, etc., and you have a green, an effective source of green ammonia, green urea, because it's a low carbon source, that bodes well for the story of Genesis. Terry, what have you been seeing from the governments in terms of support for the Genesis project? Are they thumbs up, thumbs down? What are they saying about you guys and the project?
Well, sure. We've had incentives that have been offered to us from the province, and because of the carbon capture, we've actually applied for tax incentives from the federal government for carbon capture. One of the things with those incentives, though, is that a lot of them are based around incumbents, so people who are already currently in Saskatchewan. And not that we won't use them, but we wouldn't use them right away, because once we build a brand new plant, we're going to have a lot of capital cost allowances where those tax breaks wouldn't come in. But at the same time, we've got one for not paying PST on materials. We have another one that's it's called OGPI, which is a grant towards carbon credits. And for the most part, the government itself, especially at the crown level, so the Sask Power, Sask Water, Sask Energy, Transgas, they've been extremely good to work with. We meet with them on an ongoing basis, and they have at one point in time, Rob, we were looking at Alberta. And in Alberta, when we were looking there, and Jason was talking about outside battery limits and the infrastructure that's in the corridor, well, in order to access those outside battery limits in Alberta, you would have to go up to Fort Saskatchewan. And because that's where they all are, the rail and the gas and the water. So we felt that Belle Plaine was more central, but in Alberta, you also have to deal with multiple different private utilities, where in Saskatchewan you go have a meeting with the government and you're meeting with everybody all at the same time. So it's a little bit easier.
Well, that's really good. So I wanted to cover off the location. I wanted to cover off government support. I wanted to cover off the badges that are surrounding the Genesis project. Back to you again, Terry. On the economic driver of the project, we've talked a lot. You and I have talked a lot about the price of nitrogen, the price of nitrogen is dictated, and the price of natural gas, and the delta between the two. And I'll go to you first, and then Jason could add some color on this. This is important for farmers to understand, and I'm not going to steal your thunder, but lay it on me.
Well, sure. I mean, in North America, we're importers of nitrogen fertilizer, and the pricing mechanism to establish that price in North America is NOLA, New Orleans, Louisiana. And so the further away you get from NOLA, the higher you pay for your fertilizer. So producers in Western Canada, farmers in Western Canada, they pay the highest price for fertilizer on the continent, and in most cases, the world. Well, there's two pricing mechanisms for natural gas in North America. One is in Calgary, Alberta, called AECO. AECO sells their gas in gigajoules in Canadian dollars, and the other one is Henry Hub, which is basically out of New Orleans, Louisiana, but it's priced out of the NYMEX. And the NYMEX, they sell their natural gas in British thermal units in US dollars. And so even with the dollar spread from Canadian to American dollars, AECO will always have a price advantage over Henry Hub. So the plants in Western Canada are selling at the highest price and they're manufacturing at the lowest cost. So this is a very robust project. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's M&P or PricewaterhouseCoopers or any financial institution we talk about. It's very robust. It's very attractive to financiers.
So when you think about that, we pay some of the highest nitrogen prices in the world. We have some of the cheapest natural and most robust natural gas supplies in the world. This just makes sense that we should be doing this, and the economic drivers behind it are really important. And from an agronomic standpoint, in my career, I've watched farmers steadily increase their yields over time, which means they've gone from 75 pounds of nitrogen per acre to easily 120 to 150, and a lot of guys are pushing higher than that. So that means that the demand driver won't go away. Canada is one of 7 or so countries in the world that can produce more agricultural food than it consumes. So we have to punch above our belt, and there will be continued pressure on Canada as an exporting nation to help backfill some of the demands in the world. So as a farmer, you guys are asking farmers to invest in this up to 75% of the equity stake in the project. Farmers, would be taking fertilizer off of the Genesis project, and then they would receive an ROI based on their investment. I can't invest. I'm not a farmer. But farmers can invest right now, especially if you're looking at a multi-generational farm family. And Jason, I want you to talk a little bit around, I've talked to the M&P people around the numbers here, and I've looked at the ROI, and it looks significant. And if you're, a lot of people advise farmers to have off-farm investments. So you have an off-farm investment here in Genesis Fertilizer that provides a handsome ROI to your investment portfolio, and you have a guaranteed supply of fertilizer. Can you add some more color to that, or your thoughts?
For sure. And I just want to go back and sort of follow up with where Terry ended off on. It's really frustrating in Western Canada that where we're awash in natural gas, which is the primary input to make nitrogen fertilizer, and our price of fertilizer in Western Canada is based on what it costs to produce fertilizer in the Arab Gulf or in China. Because our price, as Terry said, it's a stack up of prices. So the incumbent producers in Western Canada, and hey, they're doing their job for their shareholders. They're maximizing profit. That's what they're supposed to do. But the cost of fertilizer in Western Canada has nothing to do with the cost of natural gas. It's the cost of what it takes to buy a ton of fertilizer somewhere else in the world. We'll say China as an example. Put it on a boat, bring it to New Orleans, unload it off a boat onto a barge, bring it up the Mississippi, off a barge onto a rail car, and then on a rail car to Western Canada. That is the price stack they use to price fertilizer in Western Canada. It's got nothing to do with the cost of production. So what it is, it's replacement cost. They say, well, it costs $750 to bring a ton in from China, so we're going to charge $750 here in Western Canada.
CF Industries, Yara, et cetera, use that price base to figure out what the wholesale retail pricing is in Western Canada, and let the profits fall where they may.
Yeah, and good for them. That's what they're supposed to do for their shareholders. But when we do an analysis of what the 5-year trailing price was of urea fertilizer, it's about $750 a ton. And that's taking out the blip of 2022 when the prices spiked $500 a ton because of the Ukraine war. And that's just another thing when we talk about security of supply. Look what that one little thing did that wasn't here in North America, something going on in Ukraine. And suddenly, here in Western Canada, prices of fertilizer go up $500 a ton, yet the cost of gas didn't go up. Nothing went up.
Yeah.
It's just, oh, the world market went up, and therefore it's the replacement cost. So, back to your ROI, I'm not going to say, well, it's this percent ROI or that percent of ROI, but we all know that today fertilizers, urea is $900 a ton, and it was 800 last month or whatever. 700 in our financial model, we're using approximately $750 per metric ton. Well, I can tell you that the cost to produce that ton is about $150. So you could do the math there yourself on what a cost of production is, and when it's selling for $750, we're calculating, I think conservatively, there's $500 a ton of profit margin there. $500 a ton.
Farmers have a chance to own a chunk of this. If you have any questions, the audience, if you have any questions, throw it in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll address it. This is a really special moment because Jason's always on the go. Terry's always on the road. Speaking of on the road, Terry, you've been talking to farmers all across Western Canada, you and your team. And, I'm just curious, as I know you were just in Port of Churchill last week. How's it going out there?
It's actually going pretty good, and I'm surprised a little bit. 2 weeks ago, we had a record week, and last week was solid, and we had a record day on Monday this week. So I can't really say that it's all one thing, Rob, but it's I think we're getting closer and closer. The risk is shrinking and shrinking, and even outside of the Arctic Gateway, we're poised, we're sitting, we're ready to put another couple of puzzles in the puzzle in the next couple of weeks, and farmers see this, and I think there is some sovereignty. We're Canadians. We need to build this as a Canadian.
Some sentiment coming out there. Yep.
Yeah.
Terry, I don't know what you mean. I don't get it. I don't understand what Canadians have to package everything up and try to hold it all inside. I don't understand. So
exactly. So
sorry about that.
In closure, it's going pretty good, and while I think, we've already talked to enough farmers. If those people who are still thinking about getting involved, get involved. We're sold out. It won't take much. And we do believe that we're going to get to a point where everybody's going to be rushing to the table when we make some of the next announcements that we're about to make.
Okay. So, $100,000. Let's say I was going to invest $100,000. I think the number is 15% down now, and 85% when shovels are going in the ground. Does that money go in your pocket, Terry? Is that money going in your pocket?
Well, eventually it does. We get everybody. The company actually raising the money is Access Capital.
That's what I was trying to drive at. So the check doesn't get made out to Genesis Fertilizer. It gets made out to Access Capital. So who the heck are these guys?
Well, Access Capital, they're an exempt market dealer. They're registered in every province that we're raising money in. And so anybody who does cut a check writes it to Access Capital and Trust. So it goes into them, goes through a compliance process. We apply for it, and then they give it to us to do things like what we're doing right now on the feed. Now, one thing I was going to just slightly correct you on, Rob. If you're an accredited investor and not a farmer, you actually can invest in this project. So not that there's a different class in shares, there's just different pools. There's an offtake pool, farmers who want to take product from the plant. And then there's just what we call a strategic pool, where anybody who likes this project, who is an accredited investor, can invest in this project, and we've got people.
I've been doing this with you guys for how long, and this is the first time I heard that I actually could invest as a strategic investor. All I have to do is become an accredited investor. Someday I hope to become that. But you're saying that outside investors, accredited investors, can come into a pool.
Yeah, that's right. And we have some. We have people that are actually even farmers, like farmers in Ontario, who don't want offtake. They put their money just into the strategic pool, or guys who are pretty driven on anhydrous ammonia.
Can you take investment from U.S. investors?
Not today.
Not right now.
Okay. No. Our limited partnership today is for Canadian residents.
Okay, sure. So just Canada only.
Okay, got it. I understand. So, Phil, I see a question from you. We'll get to it in just a second. Phil, I see your question coming in here. So let's talk a little bit about that. So a farmer, do I have my percentages right? 100,000, they put down 15 now, and they have to put in 85 when, what's the term? When you're Jason, when you're shovel
When we
ready?
get the financial investment decision. So that means basically
What does that mean?
That means the table is set. We've finished our feed. We know
Yeah.
our cost on the project. All the contracting is done. So we've got the EPC contract in place. We've got all the debt lined up, all the equity lined up, and so we have all the bank loans and everything is in place. And then of course the condition precedent would be that all the equity needs to come in. So that's when we would do the cash call, and then we would put the shovel in the ground. So banks would have to make sure that the equity's in the bank account before they.
So theoretically, farmers could own equity 75 up to 75% equity in the project, and you're going to raise. I think the money, the number is 450 million from farmers. Is that the target?
Our target's about 450, yeah.
And then the rest would be what, leveraged financing?
Be leveraged and plus the strategic. We think it is important to bring some strategics in because they always bring value to the project.
What does that mean, strategics? What does that mean? Sounds like a fancy word.
It could be a pension fund. It could be one of our input providers, like our gas provider, or it could be a distributor. Somebody that's going to help bring some value to the project, because maybe one of those might bring some other type of financing or help with the financing stack. So.
So if you're a fertilizer retailer, whether it be independent or some other form of fertilizer retailer in Western Canada, wouldn't you be looking pretty hard at the Genesis project right now?
You would think so, because if you're going to deal with retailer margins of 25, 10, 25, 30, $40 a ton is what you're going to get if you're buying from the wholesale to retail. Of course, lots of retailers, they buy it in June or July and they wait for the product to appreciate and then they sell it. But I don't know why you wouldn't buy offtake tons if you can make $500 a ton.
I owned two retail facilities, one in Two Hills, Alberta, and I was shares in one in Riverhurst, Saskatchewan. And it was always amazing that I moved 2,205 pounds of product for like $20 or $15. And the money was always made actually on the purchase side, not the retail side. So Phil asked a question, and Terry, back to you on this one. He said, with a share, would a producer have the option to pick up blended products, NPKs, etc., from the Genesis Supercenter? So why don't you hit that one, Terry?
Sure. I mean, absolutely. So that's why we are building these distribution houses, and we're putting in a HIM blender from Sackett, Waconia, and that's what we did at Belle Plaine. There's only two in Western Canada. One's at Belle Plaine, and there's one at Grassy Lake in Alberta. But these HIM blenders can, like I said, blend a Super B in 7.5 minutes. The facility that we've built is all enclosed, so you stay out of the weather. The floor in the alleyway is heated, so the product stays dry. We have an oiler to dust the product if it comes in dusty. 100% of the product goes through a conditioner. The HIM blender's got multiple nozzles that can spray boron, zinc, agrotane, whatever you want on the product at the same time. And it's NPKs plus.
Yeah. So, and again, Phil, thanks for the question. And so yes, you can pick up your blends, and they can include your micros impregnation, your urease inhibitor, nitrification inhibitors. The answer, I guess, to the question is yes. A lot of farmers, though, are picking up straight product, taking it to the farm, because the blender is now on rubber. A lot of the blending is being done with variable rate fertilizer applications. So you may have your starter blend that you pick up, and then the rest of it, your straights, such as your potash and nitrogen, might be variabilized right in the field. So your blending is in the field. So a lot of it's coming in a straight. Vignesh asks a question: does Genesis plan to integrate renewable energy solutions into its operation to further support sustainability and cost efficiency? So over to you, Jason.
Yeah, and just back to the other one, and that's why we're looking for phosphate supply to come into Churchill, because to the question, well, can we blend? Yes, we're looking to secure all the fertilizer components to do that, not just the nitrogen that we're producing.
Jason, before you go, just to go back to the previous one, one thing we haven't talked about, Rob, is we are producing urea ammonium sulfate. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
that,
Forgot
right.
about that.
And
Yeah.
so in terms of operational efficiency, with that, and people may know it as a Amidas, right? And Yara imports Amidas into North America now.
Beautiful product. The Amidas product shows up very well on research trials all over the place. Really nice.
Yeah, so basically it's sulfur within the urea pearl, which in terms of operational efficiency, you don't need 2 tanks, you only need 1 tank, and because the sulfur's in the pearl, and then it takes that, the sulfur fines where they get wet and plugs up the drills, it takes that away as well. So it's and we'll be the only manufacturer of UAS in North America.
Right on. And back to you, Jason, on the renewable.
Yeah, so when we were doing our basis of design, which is where you lock down what your final design of your plant's going to be with exactly this size of an ammonia facility and this size of a urea facility and so on. We analyzed, I want to say 8 different scenarios of how to optimize that. And we had this work done by ThyssenKrupp in Germany. And the focus on some of that was to make sure our plant was designed so that in the future we could implement renewables if it became feasible from a cost, or even, because that's all going to depend on if somebody's willing to pay more for the output, right? So we've designed it so that we could bring in green electricity. We've done that on the project.
I didn't even know that. First time I heard that too. Good question, by the way. Yeah. Chris asked a question. Tell us more about the plans for the supercenters, timeline for construction of facilities. These are very important logistics for farmers. Terry?
Yeah, well, sure. So once we hit what they call FID, final investment decision, meaning we're putting shovel in the ground, the plant's being built at that time, we're going to start to build the other supercenters. That's the plan. And did I miss it?
Yeah. No. And as far as the logistics, and we know that a lot of fertilizer goes direct from the plant to the farm now because it doesn't need to pass through a blender. So we will have the ability for product to go straight out of the nitrogen plant, straight urea or UAS, right to the farmyard. Now, we'll want to make sure it's cooled down. You don't want to put hot fertilizer in your bin or anything like that, but we will have it so there'll be direct logistics from the plant to the farmyard. But we'll also be able to offer that blending service because we have a big super center right at Belle Plaine. So even then, we could probably do a blend at Belle Plaine and then ship it direct. Like we can take the urea or UAS coming direct out of the plant into our super center at Belle Plaine, beneficate it with whatever else the farmer wants, and then ship it out direct to the farm and save on the handling and logistics. So we think we can create a really cool, efficient logistics system just because we're hand in glove. The owners are the off takers, and it's going to be a very transparent process. I just see it being very seamless. This is how we're discussing. It's going to be a very open dialogue. They're the owners. So how do you want your
farmers understand? The farmers will be paying retail pricing, competitive retail pricing for Western Canadian fertilizer for their product, but the benefit comes back in the ROI they get as an offtake investor, right?
Yeah, as a dividend, or we'll call it a dividend. It's really a distribution when you're in a limited partnership, but it would be in the form of that. So that's going to, you can say that's offsetting your fertilizer cost. And why are we going out there at market price? Well, one, we don't want to disrupt the market. We don't want to get in some price war with anybody. That's not what we're here for.
Don't you want to make money for your shareholders?
That's right. And so it's the farmers putting the money in that should get the benefit of it. We don't want to. It would be unfair to them if we started trying to bring the price down in Western Canada for fertilizer after they've invested money to build a plant. So we want the farmers that invest to be the benefactors.
Vignesh says, thanks for the explanation on the renewables. Hey, guys, let's talk a little bit about timeline here. And I get questions all the time, Jason, around budget. Can you guys really hold on to a budget? Like we're talking, what, $2.3 billion project? That's with a B, that's $1 billion. That's a lot of money. So can you talk about your confidence of being able to do a budget and beyond budget and timeline?
Yeah, it's a lot of zeros for sure. But again, it's not a novel project. These have been built before. So the number we have now, the 2.3 billion, we didn't just pull that out of thin air. That was with a lot of consultation with our technology providers who have recent information from other projects, right? So they have their reference library to say, oh, okay, well, we know that for this size of an ammonia plant, it's going to cost about this much, or this is what it was on the last 3 projects. So we have those numbers, and then we took we factored in the cost of doing construction in Western Canada, because we know it's a little more to build here than some other places, just because of our winter. Winter and the cost of our good subtrades, and we know it's going to cost more here, but we factored that in. But this is the importance of doing the feed, and why we're spending approximately $50 million to do the feed, the front end engineering design. That's why that's so important, because that's the work you're doing, so that when it's time to put a shovel in the ground, what your costs are, and you're not going to have those surprises. So spending more money, a little more money up front to do a good job, is for the benefit of all the owners, to make sure when we do put a shovel in the ground, we don't have these budget overruns and surprises. And part of the contract, when we do start, there's a good portion of the contract will be fixed price. Like, we'll know that a portion of it, but not everything can be. But it'll be collaborative with the construction company. In this case, PCL. It'll be collaborative about some of this will be open book at the end on some of those costs, because you can't know everything at the start of the project. But we'll lock down as much of the pricing as we can, and we feel that we're in a pretty good spot where what the number we're using, and the project is so robust, and the returns are so robust. If it comes in a little higher than our budget, it really doesn't impact the ROI very much.
Right enough. If there's any questions, we've got about 8 minutes left in this really interesting chat. And so I want to shift a little bit more onto a personal level. I'm an entrepreneur, I got 2 startup companies on the go right now, and it's hard work. And you guys have been working really hard. Terry, why are you doing this?
Yeah, a good question. Right off the bat, I've always believed in the project. This is really all about profit staying in Canada, profit staying in farmers' pockets, and like I tell our clients, if we have a happy farm community, we have a happy economy, and farmers spend their money at home, and and that dollar crosses Main Street many, many times, and it's just a great project, and that's why I'm here. And I'm too far in now, to be honest with you, Rob, to turn around and walk away. So we're here to make sure that it gets done. And I tell people, I'm semi-retired, and I'm down to working only 7 days a week now.
So I admire, I know how hard you've been on the road with all the meetings with Genesis prior to seating here. Jason, you've been an entrepreneur. You've started many companies. When I'm trying to reach out to you, I never know what part of the world you're in or what time zone you're on, and you still look fresh and lively. And so comment a little bit on your take on what it is, like what's driving Jason.
So that's funny. It's funny you say that. I look fresh and awake. It's never happened to me before in my life. Yesterday I was on a conference call, and I was so tired because I had run out to Manitoba for some meetings the day before, and I had to catch an early flight back from Winnipeg, and I got no sleep. I fell asleep during my meeting yesterday. First time ever in my life, because we were getting around a little.
Well, you look good today. Yeah. So,
but we're all over the world on this project. It's trips to Korea. We're on a 15-hour time difference with Korea, so I'm just finishing my day. I'm just finishing up sort of things here at about 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and all of a sudden, ping, 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 the emails start coming in from our engineers in Korea. Our technology providers are in Europe, so it's really a 24-hour-a-day project. So it's a massive workload, just and commitment on the time frame. You're in every time zone, so you're always on. Why I'm doing it? I'm so passionate about this project because it's good for Canadian farmers. I'm a farmer. I grew up on a farm. I have a lot of passion for a profitable farm community, and I just need to see this project through because it just has to get done. It is so important for Canadian farmers. And 2 days ago, I was at a meeting in south of Winnipeg, and we had 10 great colonies in a meeting. We all came together and we gave a presentation. And, it makes so much sense when you sit back and look at something like a 100 egg colony that they're going to be farming for the next 50 years, 100 years.
Intergenerational?
Why wouldn't you invest in your fertilizer production when there's $500 a ton that you're paying out every year to somebody else? Why wouldn't you do it? And the thing is, we can do it. It's not like this is some impossible reach. This is just organizing money. I know it's a petrochemical plant, but it's not that complicated, and we've got all the right players. So why wouldn't you do it?
Well, I want to wrap up by thanking you guys for taking the time to be with us on an AgVisor Pro webinar. The company I'm running right now is called T1 Technology Corporation. We have two products. We have a Visor Pro AI product for the farm and heavy equipment sector that we're launching. A lot of people don't know much about that, but we're working with clients across Canada, like Young's Equipment and Mazer Group, and Torgeson's in Montana, Burnups, and we got Ag World on, and Trosha Motors, and we've got Full Line, and we've got Ag Revolution, and we got Macintosh in Australia on board. So T1 Technology Corporation has Visor Pro on the farm equipment, heavy equipment side. And for you in agriculture, I'm passionate that we need a communication platform for agriculture, and that's what AgVisor Pro is. So for all of you listening, I invite you to download AgVisor Pro on your iOS and Android. Throw questions out into the AgVisor Pro application. Join the Genesis Fertilizer community. And to wrap up, Terry and Jason, I want to thank you guys for your energy and your dedication, all the hard work you've been doing, and for being part of AgVisor Pro. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys on the road. I know we got Ag in Motion coming up and lots of other exciting things post springtime. And for the farmers, get busy on asking your questions and lock this up before springtime so that you can have this in your pocket before you go to the field. Anyway, that brings this AgVisor Pro webinar to a close. Thank you again for Genesis Fertilizer. A special shout out to Taylor Valli, who is our marketing coordinator, and Jody with Genesis, who coordinates all of the. They heard these cats, and can you imagine trying to get Jason, Terry, and Rob on a Zoom at the same time? So thanks a lot to those dedicated professionals. Anyways, we'll call it a quit, and thanks a lot. Talk to you later, everybody. Over and out.